Good evening. Just a couple of minutes or a minute or two late. I was busy setting up a new tripod tonight. If you're able to join me, do say hello, put in a comment so I know you're there. So I've chosen to talk about magnesium tonight, and I'll get on and talk about that in a moment. Before I do that, I would just like to say that my course, I've mentioned it a couple of times, but my course is now live. You can find the full details for that on my website, and I've also been posting about that as well. So do take a look at that. It's been devised as a self-help course for you to easily follow. It's a video course. It's easy to follow in little short chunks that you can dip in and out of, following through. There is a set routine, but you don't have to follow it in the order that it says. I would recommend watching it like that to start with. And it's a very low cost introductory price with a huge amount of valuable information that I've put in there. So do take a look on my website, IBS Relief, and there's a link that has been put in various posts, and I'll continue to put some other posts about that. So, hi Jane, nice to see you watching. Do say if you're there watching tonight. So I thought I would talk about magnesium. And I said when I was setting this up and posting out that magnesium is one of the most popular supplements that I tend to recommend. In fact, I use magnesium nearly all the time as a supplement. And that's not to say that you have to take magnesium and you can't get it from foods, but I'm going to go on and talk about why I so commonly recommend magnesium, why it's important for so many aspects of our health, why we get depleted or may be depleted in it, why it's harder to obtain today than perhaps it was in days gone by. And just how many uses it has in the body. So, lovely magnesium. The only one I've got in my cupboard at the moment is this version here, and lucky me, it's one that was sent to me to try. It's a powdered one, but usually I actually buy magnesium in tablet form. You can get it in capsule form, but that happens to be a powdered one. So you can get it in all different shapes and sizes, and if tablets are difficult to swallow for you, then powdered one is a good thing to be taking. So magnesium, why do I think it's so fantastic? Let me just start by saying the amount we need. So we need about 300 to 400 milligrams a day. That won't mean much to you, but that is called Mag 365 because on average that's the amount we need in the body, 365 milligrams of magnesium a day. And is it possible to overdose on it? I think it's highly unlikely. It's not a toxic supplement to take. And the sign that you might be having too much magnesium is usually to do with loose bowels. And I'll come on to talk about who should and who shouldn't, potentially for gut health reasons, use magnesium. But the first sign of having way too much magnesium can be loose bowels. Of course, don't assume that's the only reason why you may have loose bowels, but it can be a sign. So I typically recommend people to take between 300, maybe 450 milligrams of magnesium as a supplement if they should need it. And there's reasons why I may up and down that amount. Now, magnesium as a supplement comes in lots of different forms, and you may find in a multi, you may think, well, I've got magnesium in a multi, surely that's okay. But if you look very closely at the ingredients on the side of a multi, you may well find that it could have, I don't know, say 50, 60 milligrams of magnesium. And I'm here talking about using 300 to 400 milligrams of magnesium as a supplement. The reason why in a multi they can't put much in is to do with the formulation. And I've just mentioned at the start that this one I use here is a powdered one, but you can get it in tablets, and the tablets tend to be quite big. And that's because the most absorbable forms of magnesium tend to come in quite large capsules. So multis are great things to take, but you're not going to get what I consider to be a therapeutic dose of magnesium. So it's great to take if you don't need that much, and a multis can be very useful. And the other thing with a multi, unless you're buying very particular supplements and maybe quite expensive ones that I may recommend, is that it's to do with the formulation. So let me just talk about that. When we buy supplements, we have to look quite carefully at the form and formulation, and it's all to do with the bioavailability and how easily the supplements and the nutrients are, how well they are absorbed from the gut into the bloodstream. Now, the thing about a lot of these mineral type supplements, and magnesium is a mineral, is that they often come in what we call an inorganic form. So you may see that as a carbonate, you may see it advertised as an oxide. Some supplements, they come as sulfides, and they are inorganic, and they're not well absorbed from the research shows are not well absorbed from the gut into the bloodstream. The formulations that I tend to recommend are citrate. Most of the ones I recommend is citrate, and it is a pretty cheap supplement to buy. So magnesium citrate is the most common supplement that I recommend. There are other formulations like glycinate or malate, and they tend to be more expensive, but I find magnesium citrate works pretty well for the things I tend to recommend for people. So magnesium citrate, 300 usually, sometimes a little bit more is what I tend to recommend. It's pretty much the amount that an adult needs on a daily basis, and yes, we can get it from foods, which I'll talk about. And I'll talk about also why we may not be getting enough and things that can impair the absorption of it. Now, why do I think it's so fabulous? Well, if you look at the information online about magnesium, you'll very, very quickly see that magnesium is involved in over 300 processes in the body. It's used in so many different processes, and whereas we have to be really careful in what we can say as therapists in terms of saying that something can do something, and most of the time as therapists we're very careful with our language to say this may help with that or this may help with something else. There is so much research around magnesium to show that it absolutely does a huge amount that it could say on the tin. But you'll probably find with most supplements we don't put it on there. They don't put it on there just to protect themselves. So the very first thing I say to most clients that I see is that magnesium is known as nature's tranquilizer. It's very, very calming to the body. If we're feeling uptight, if we're feeling stressed, if we're feeling a little bit anxious, then magnesium is my go-to. It's the first thing I would recommend. It's very, very calming, and it can be also very useful for sleep as well. And in terms of when I say to people to take it during the day, it depends for what purpose. So if it's just for general needs that I'll go on to talk about, then I'll often say just take it in the morning or whenever it's convenient for you, particularly if you need it as a calming sort of de-stress approach to your everyday life. If you need it for sleep, then I'm going to say take it in the evening, because it can be very, very helpful for this conversion of serotonin into melatonin that is required for sleep and to calm us down in the evening. But if it's for daytime, day-to-day calmness, then take it first thing in the morning, or you can split the dose, take it morning, take it lunchtime, you may take it later on in the day as well. So generally I say take it first thing in the morning. So nature's tranquilizer, it's a very common term for magnesium, very, very calming. That doesn't mean it makes you sleepy. It doesn't do that to you at all. So whereas some things that you may take, and certainly around like antidepressants and certain things, may have more of a drowsy effect on you, you don't get that with magnesium at all. So that's my absolute number one go-to. The second thing it's needed for, I've just talked about calming, but it's actually involved in the energy cycle. So for those of you with a little bit of biology and chemistry, you may have heard of the citric acid cycle or the Krebs cycle. So magnesium is involved in the generation of energy in the body. So it has that two things. It's calming to the body, but it helps the production of energy. So if you're flagging a little bit, magnesium could be useful for that too, and particularly if we are lacking in it. It is also very, very helpful if we're trying to support bone health. Now, doctors may recommend for osteoporosis, and it depends how severe it is. They will commonly recommend a supplement called AdCal. It probably has other names as well, but the supplement they recommend is not just calcium these days, but they use calcium with vitamin D. The vitamin D is added to help the absorption of calcium from the gut into the bloodstream. Now, magnesium is really, really important to help the absorption of calcium from the bloodstream up into bone. So whereas calcium is known for that we absolutely must have sufficient calcium in the body in order to create strong bones, what is not often mentioned, and there are a couple of other cofactors, is the importance of magnesium when we need strong bones. So certainly for slightly older women who've gone through the menopause, then if we want to keep our bones strong, other than thinking about our sources of calcium and are we taking vitamin D or getting vitamin D from the sunshine, is to think about our magnesium intake. The other reason for that is it's not just to do with the strong bones. If we end up consuming a lot of calcium, but we don't have the right cofactors, particularly magnesium, to ensure that the calcium is getting from the bloodstream into the bones, calcium can settle in other places. And I have seen it. Of course, I can't say it's a direct cause, and I'm not making a diagnosis, but I have seen clients in the past who have had gallstones, and gallstones can be caused by calcium and they can be caused by cholesterol. But I've seen clients who've had gallstones, but they've also had signs of osteopenia, which is the one before osteoporosis. There could be a link there. There could be a link, the fact that calcium is, there's sufficient calcium in the diet, but the calcium is not getting into the bone and it has to be deposited in other places. So the gallbladder is one place that calcium can be deposited, and it can also be deposited in joints. So, you know, stiff joints, maybe excess calcium being deposited as crystals. It can also be deposited in arteries. So there's lots of reasons why, if we want to keep our bones strong, we must make sure we've got the magnesium, but also for those other reasons as well, for supporting our overall health, that we may want to make sure that calcium is getting to where we want it to go, which is into our bones and for our teeth as well. So absolutely essential for our bones. It's also important for muscles and for keeping muscles active and for movement. I've just mentioned about calcium for bones, but in a different way now. Calcium and magnesium sort of work synergistically together when we talk about muscle contraction. And this will help explain what I'm going to go on and talk about next with other conditions. But whereas calcium contracts muscles, magnesium is required to help the muscles relax. So, you know, for day-to-day muscles movement, you know, we not only need the calcium, we need the magnesium as well. So that brings me on to another essential role for magnesium, is when people are experiencing a lot of cramping. I know if I get cramping, sometimes I get cramping in my feet of all places, but you know, occasionally in my calves I might think, oh, I've not been taking magnesium recently, I'll think about my magnesium intake and start taking some. So there can be other reasons, but usually for cramping, the first thing, my first go-to would be magnesium. And cramping can occur without thinking of like your legs cramping, but the cramping, if we think about headaches, that tension in our head, maybe to do that constriction in the head, maybe a lack of magnesium and causing a little bit of constriction in the head. And certainly with migraines, which is different to a headache, but magnesium can be very, very helpful for migraines. There can be other things needed as well. But certainly for headaches, I would definitely try magnesium. For cramping, I would definitely try magnesium. There's been some research as well, if you were to look into this, with regards to asthma. Again, other reasons, but asthma can be constriction in the bronchioles, in the lungs. So we want to make sure that the muscles are not overly constricted there, and magnesium may be helpful for asthma. And coming on to bowel health, constipation is another reason where magnesium can be very, very helpful. Now, if it's chronic long-term constipation, there are other things I tend to recommend, but don't ignore magnesium. It's certainly worth a try. So constipation and magnesium can be very, very helpful. I wouldn't look at anything less than about 300 milligrams for that, which brings me on to when wouldn't I use it? So I said at the start, the toxicity with magnesium, and if you were to take far too much, and it would be usually quite a lot of magnesium, it can cause loose bowel movements. And that's why, you know, I've talked about the constipation. We've talked what happens with the bowel. We've got this peristaltic motion. We've got this contraction and relaxation, moving everything through right the way from the top to the bottom. So when everything's in the colon, we need that contraction and relaxation to move everything along. And as I said, calcium contracts and magnesium relaxes. So as you can understand, too much magnesium, that's what relaxes the bowel, helps with constipation, but can make everything too loose. So if your bowel issues, if you were to have any bowel problems, and it tends to be that things are on the loose side, I would be cautious with magnesium. It's not to say that you couldn't take any, but I would go very steadily, and I'd look more to start with at the foods as your focus. What else have I got here? So yes, energy I've talked about, your headaches, bones, migraines, muscle movement, protein formation. So when we eat foods, protein gets broken down to amino acids, and then once it's in the body, amino acids have to get built back up again to form different types of protein that we need in our body, whether it's things like collagen and elastin formation. So we need magnesium to help that formation back to protein again. So time's ticking on. Why do we get depleted in magnesium? Now, I've mentioned how it's a great stress reliever and it's known as nature's tranquilizer, but stress itself is terribly depleting of magnesium. And most of us today lead quite stressful lives, and particularly through the last few months, people are leading quite stressful lives, may have had increased amounts of stress. Some of us have experienced stress all the time. And when we stop and look at our day-to-day lives, you know, at the moment, some people might go, actually, I'm quite relaxed, and others may say, actually, I'm feeling quite stressed. Some people have stress in their lives coming from all different directions. It's just a sort of 20th, 21st century phenomenon. Stress depletes magnesium levels. So if you know you're quite stressed, it's worth thinking about magnesium. It's quite depleted in our soil. So magnesium gets taken up into our plants, but soils today tend to be quite depleted in minerals. And so it's another reason why plants today, and the ones I go on to talk about that should be rich in these, may not be have as rich sources perhaps as they did, I don't know, 40, 50 years ago. So levels in plants tend to be less than they once were. And minerals, when we're eating food, minerals can bind to compounds and get excreted from the body. So we get certain compounds, phytates can be found in things like bread. We've got oxalates that can be found in things like spinach and rhubarb. Phosphates, we think of Coke, things like that. Minerals can bind to these compounds, and what happens if you're eating foods that are rich in magnesium, but you're also eating these other foods with these compounds, it can bind to our minerals, it can bind to things like magnesium, and it may excrete some of it out of the body, so it's not available to be absorbed into the bloodstream. So it's something to think about what you're eating in conjunction with your... Just had a call come in, so I just had to cancel that. That hasn't happened to me before. Stomach acid as well is needed for the uptake of minerals. So you may not know this, but you know, if stomach acid levels happen to be a little bit on the low side, then it can interfere with our mineral absorption too. So the important bit, other than supplementation, is how do we get this into our diets? How can we try and secure the optimum amount from our foods? Dark green leafy vegetables are a fantastic source of magnesium. They're a fantastic source of lots of other important nutrients. But dark green leafy vegetables such as your broccoli and your kale, your Brussels sprouts, even cauliflower, collards, all these dark green vegetables are a fantastic source of magnesium. Now, I've just mentioned spinach as a source of oxalates. And, you know, we used to talk about Popeye, didn't we, and iron, and how brilliant it was to get iron from spinach. But actually, iron absorption from spinach is probably not the best, and therefore not the best for magnesium either, because of the oxalate levels in it, oxalic acid. Nuts, almonds in particular, fantastic source of magnesium, and seeds as well. Things like sesame seeds, sunflower seeds, flax seeds, great sources of magnesium. Nuts and seeds do contain phytates. If you're concerned about phytates levels, what you can do is you can soak nuts and seeds and rinse them, and this does actually reduce the phytic acid levels in them. So if that is a concern, but they are good sources of magnesium. Whole grains like brown rice, it's another reason why, you know, avoid white rice. There's lots of other reasons as well. But if you want to try and ensure that you're getting your maximum level of magnesium from your foods, don't eat white rice, just focus on brown rice. Quinoa as well, great sources to get magnesium from. And legumes, your pulses, lentils, great sources. Yes, they do also contain some phytic acid, and it becomes a bit of a balancing act, particularly if you're a vegan, because we know the legumes, these pulses are where you're going to get your protein from. But it's best, as I say all the time, to vary your diet, have everything in moderation, other than maximizing your intake of your dark green leafy vegetables. Try and put some on your plate every day. Vary your vegetables, but always try and have some, because that's so important for so many reasons, but to help to maximize your magnesium. The other source of magnesium is chocolate. Hey, another good reason to eat it. Dark chocolate, ideally, your 80% chocolate. It may be a reason why you may crave it. Probably not. You probably just love chocolate. But the dark chocolate is the better one to be eating as a treat, if I dare use that word, to get some of your magnesium. So I hope that's given you a really good overview. It's so important. It's one of the main things, other than the gut supporting, digestive supporting supplements I'm recommending to many of my clients. But often magnesium is high up there, and I recommend it a huge amount of time. As you can see, for so many different reasons, we tend to need it, and we may be deficient in it and not getting enough from our day-to-day diet. Is it safe? It's very, very rare when I check clients and their medications, do I ever come across a contraindication. I don't think I've ever come across a contraindication actually with magnesium, but do be careful. If you're not sure, I'm very happy to answer a query if you've got anything and you want me to check something around magnesium. I couldn't do that for all your supplements and all your medication, but since I'm talking about magnesium and how valuable it is, then I would be very happy if you wanted to drop me a line if there's a particular medication that you're taking, and I'm very happy to do a quick check for that on that for you. So thank you for your time. I can see there's quite a few people listening tonight, and again, I hope you found that useful. I'd love some feedback. I'd love to hear some comments. Let me know anything else you'd like me to talk about. I've done a huge number of these lives now. They're all in YouTube, my Peyton Principles Natural Health YouTube channel. I think every single one of these has now been put into there. I've got people working behind the scenes helping me. I've invested time and money investing all of this. So everything is in YouTube. I've got a new website set up. And my IBS course is all ready to go if you're interested in that. So thanks for your time. I'll be back next Tuesday. Not taking any time away at the moment. I had a few days away last week, but I've got no time booked off really in the next month or so. So I'll be back next week, and I hope to see you then. So thanks for your time, and see you next week. Bye.